Colleagues, members of Congregation, thank you for joining me in Convocation House this afternoon. On previous occasions, when I've stood here to deliver the annual Oration of the Vice-Chancellor to the University, my focus has been pretty remorselessly outward-looking. And rightly so, I would argue, given the scale and the rate of the changes that have swept through the world of higher education in this country and beyond. But today I want to do something a little different. I want to turn the lens around and focus more on ourselves, to hold a mirror up, if you will, a mirror up to the university and see what emerges, to take a calm, reflective look, neither vain nor cynical, at how we are doing, at how we can protect, preserve, and nourish where appropriate, but also develop and change where both opportunity and necessity point. As we know, we never see ourselves in the mirror as others see us. But that doesn't mean that we are rendered incapable of sound or self-judgment. Calm, intelligent scrutiny of the evidence is one of the defining hallmarks of outstanding scholarship, the kind of scholarship that has stood this ancient institution in such good stead for so many centuries and continues to do so today. My intention to hold up a mirror to Oxford is not, you will be pleased to hear, a random, nor I hope a quixotic one, though I am alive to the admonition of Jean Cocteau that mirrors should think longer before they reflect. No, my intention corresponds to the moment in which we find ourselves. While it would be fatuous to claim that the winds of change in higher education have faded to a dead calm, they have certainly not changed direction radically in recent months. Whatever you may think of the way in which higher education is now being funded in this country, it seems highly unlikely that any government is going to tear it all up in the foreseeable future and start again. We are still more than 18 months away from a general election in which, whatever the prevailing political rhetoric, the state of the economy will continue to dictate some hard facts. In that sense, the higher education policy landscape is set for the time being. The right moment, I would contend, to take a breather and to get out that mirror. I have also more personal reasons for choosing this moment for a little institutional self-scrutiny. I am today embarking upon my 5th year as Vice-Chancellor. And while you will never hear me claim that I know all about the University of Oxford, I hope that I now have enough accumulated knowledge and certainly enough real affection for my thoughts to have a modicum of substance. In one sense, of course, the university has been engaged in a process of self-scrutiny for some months, with the careful development of our newly published strategic plan. It is a document that provides an important guide both to where we are and where we wish to be. Rather than rehearse it here, I want to focus on 3 key areas. These are funding Oxford, diversifying Oxford, and digitizing Oxford. First, let me focus on funding. I've already mentioned that most contentious aspect of HE finance, the funding of undergraduate education. Oxford's approach is pretty straightforward: to provide the most talented students, regardless of personal circumstance, with the best education, teaching and facilities, study and support, the best education anywhere in the world. So how are we doing? Well, our students are outstanding, and the education we provide is recognized to be world-class. However, what do not compute for Oxford are the finances. Like most universities in the country, old and new, small and large, we have set tuition charges at the maximum permissible, £9,000 per year. I've read that some universities are doing very nicely, thank you, on that basis, comfortably covering the cost of what they provide to their students. That may or may not be the case for them, but one thing I am quite sure about is that it does not add up for Oxford, where the new regime of increased tuition charges for students but greatly reduced government spending on teaching have done little to change the basic financial equation. How can they, when the real cost of an Oxford education is at least £16,000 per undergraduate every year? That represents a funding shortfall of more than £7,000 per year per student. Or put another way, a university-wide gap, more of a chasm really, of over £70 million a year that Oxford has to plug. Is that possible? Well, in one sense, yes, or we wouldn't be here today. Is it sustainable? And that is the critical question. The generosity of our benefactors remains vital, and we've been blessed in that regard by visionary programs like the Moritz Hyman Scholarships. Certainly, endowments and other gifts matter a great deal, but that should not obscure the painful fact that money which the collegiate university spends on subsidizing undergraduate education is money that cannot be spent in other places. Places where it is badly needed, on our physical infrastructure, on stronger support for graduate students, on educational resources and renewal, and the many other things required to sustain a world-leading centre of learning and research in the 21st century. Of course, an observer peering at the image in our Oxford mirror might say, well, cut deeper into your cost base. Narrow the gap that way. Do you really need that labour-intensive tutorial system and all of those colleges? Get rid of some of the books and sell off the historic collections. In other words, make Oxford something other than Oxford. Well, perhaps I exaggerate. And we certainly do need to be sure that we are using our resources to maximum effect in the service of that deceptively simple formula: the best possible education for the most talented young minds. As others have observed, excellence in most walks of life does not come cheap. And unless we can offer the best, we can't expect to get the best. Oxford has an outstanding reputation, but that will not endure over time unless it continues to be underpinned by outstanding quality. And talking of excellence, allow me, if you will, one brief housekeeping digression. A longer version of this speech will appear in the University Gazette, recording new arrivals, departures, retirements, and regrettably, the passing of valued colleagues. As we all know, a university is only as strong as the people who make up its community. And in that regard, as in so many, Oxford has been and remains blessed by excellence. But let me now return to the question of funding. At the time of the Brown Review of Higher Education Funding 3 years ago, Oxford put forward a proposal that a university should be able to vary tuition charges over time in order to bring them closer to the real cost of the education it was providing for its students, always with the absolute proviso of robust arrangements to ensure student affordability. It is not a new idea, but it is one whose time will surely come. It seems increasingly inevitable that government, any government in the future, is going to have to evolve a more sophisticated and indeed variegated approach to the challenges of student funding. The idea of a market, and that is what is ostensibly being created, the idea of a market in which every item, virtually regardless of content and quality, is the same price, well, it seems a little odd. On the other hand, given the great diversity of the institutions in our higher education system, the notion of different universities charging significantly different amounts does not feel inherently unnatural. It is the current system that seems out of kilter. What matters surely is that an institution's charges are clearly aligned with what it offers, and that they are demonstrably not a barrier to student access. In other words, that robust and generous financial support remains readily available for students who most need it, and, where that involves loans, that they remain repayable only after graduation and only in proportion to the ability to pay. As we know, Oxford's own track record on student support is already exceptional, thanks to the most generous financial package for low-income undergraduates of any university in the country. Of course, it's understandable that so much attention is focused on a student's financial circumstances before university. But what happens after is also crucially important. And certainly, so far as Oxford is concerned, all of the evidence indicates that the quality of the education a student receives here is overwhelmingly his or her best investment for the future. This surely is part of what we mean when we talk about the transformational power of education, both for the individual and for their capacity to contribute to a wider society. And that in turn means that support for our students in the form of loans from the public purse is also a pretty sound investment. So a system of tuition charges more closely related to the true cost of an education provided, but with the strongest possible guarantees that price can be no impediment to talent, and that loan repayment is pegged to financial capacity, that surely is something that I believe in the longer run will have to be considered. Let me turn now more briefly to postgraduate funding. Oxford has been at the forefront of efforts to increase public awareness and government action about the serious consequences of the chronic underfunding of graduate study in this country. There are big issues here, both for social mobility and for the country's future competitiveness. So it is welcome to see that our repeated warnings are being heeded, with government at least beginning to grasp the nettle. A downsized national scholarship program will, in future, be targeted entirely at postgraduate students from poorer backgrounds. It isn't enough, but it is a start. And quite rightly, we are doing what we can, as with undergraduate funding, to address the issue ourselves. So when it comes to the financial conditions for prospective graduate students, they now need only to show that they have funds sufficient to cover their fees for their first year and provide assurances that living costs and fees can be met during the whole course. For our own part, we are strengthening in every way that we can the support we offer for graduate students. And yes, that includes the provision of affordable, purpose-built housing in Oxford. Last year, we launched the Oxford Graduate Student Match Fund, which supports graduate scholarships for students from around the world. It has made an excellent start. Benefactors have already committed more than £21 million, and with matching funds of more than £14 million from the university, that creates approximately 50 new scholarships. Our aim through the scheme is to create student funds equivalent to an endowment of £100 million, supporting in the region of 130 graduate scholarships in perpetuity. Just a few weeks ago, we were able to celebrate that magnificent gift of £75 million from the McCall McBain Foundation to support the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship Programme. Of course, there is much more to funding a university like Oxford than students, vital though they are. There is also the huge task of maintaining and developing our infrastructure. The libraries, the IT systems, seminar rooms, laboratories, research equipment and facilities that are essential to the conduct of our teaching, learning and research. Oxford's greatest asset is its people, but good people need, deserve and increasingly expect good facilities. We have been able to provide them, and that is becoming more and more challenging. Again, philanthropy makes an important contribution. Major projects like the refurbishment of the new Bodleian as the Western Library have been made possible by hugely generous gifts. But there is a good deal of necessary work that the university needs to look after itself. In this context, we have been very fortunate in recent years that Oxford University Press has continued as a result of its highly successful educational publishing mission around the world to make major transfers of capital from its operating surplus. These transfers have been invaluable to the rest of the university, and long may they continue. There is no reason to suppose that they won't, but it would be foolhardy to take them for granted. And it is surely sensible in any event that the major part of the transfer now goes straight into the endowment. In the past, the university has also received substantial grants to support core infrastructure through the Higher Education Funding Council, HEFCE. But in the last few years, things have changed dramatically, with Oxford's grant being reduced by more than two-thirds, from more than £36 million to around £12 million. Changes to the funding process make it much harder to plan and to build strategically. But that is something we are determined to do. And that is why we are developing a long-term strategy for the renewal of Oxford's world-class facilities in a 10-year capital investment programme. This programme aims to support outstanding research and teaching in a manner that is both sustainable and responsive to future developments, and is driven by the academic plans of our divisions. As always, we need to ensure that we are using all the funds we receive, regardless of their source, effectively and efficiently. But that is never going to provide the full financial answer, which is why we are looking very carefully at the operating surpluses that the university might generate. In the 2011-12 year, the figure was 5% of income, which we calculate to be the minimum required to sustain the current infrastructure of the university. That should be our baseline for a sustainable future for Oxford. But it is not sufficient to finance new capital investments in the longer term, the kind of investments that are necessary to maintain our position as one of the world's leading universities. Many, indeed most, of our peer organizations internationally, confronted by broadly similar challenges, many have opted to borrow. The favoured way of doing so has been to issue a bond. So, for example, if one looks at the latest Times Higher Education World University rankings, we are the only one in the top 7 not to have issued a bond. Most university bond issues are in the United States, but they are certainly not unknown on this side of the Atlantic. Cambridge, de Montfort, and most recently Manchester have gone down this route. None of this means that such a course of action is necessarily right for Oxford, and any substantial policy of borrowing, whether as a bond or some other form of loan, would require careful reflection and planning in order to establish clarity about priorities and processes, including how interest payments would be structured and met. Enough, for now at least, on funding the university. Let me turn to my second topic, diversifying Oxford. Over the course of 2014, we will be marking a significant anniversary, 40 years since women were first admitted to previously all-male undergraduate colleges. In 1974, a group of 5 colleges, Brasenose, Hertford, Jesus, St. Catherine's, and Wadham, opened their doors to women, a process of co-education which was completed in 2008 when St. Hilda's admitted its first male undergraduates. Now 45% of our students are women, double the proportion of 1974. A significant advance that will be marked in a series of special events and programs over the coming year. But that is not to say that there isn't more to do on all fronts. The gender balance among our student population may be reflected at overall university staff level. In fact, our last published figures show slightly more women than men on the payroll. However, if one focuses specifically on academics, a different picture emerges. Women account for 25% of academic staff and just 18% of professorial staff. We are serious about meeting the challenges of increasing the diversity of our staff. The university currently holds an Athena Swan Institutional Bronze Award, indicating our strong commitment to addressing the underrepresentation of women. Our published equality objectives and the new strategic plan include specific undertakings. And I was delighted last term to announce a new £1 million initiative, the Vice-Chancellor's Diversity Fund, to promote diversity among academic and research staff at Oxford. As I said when that fund was announced, it is only by having a fully diverse workforce where people are appointed and promoted solely according to their merits that the university can achieve the very best in teaching and research. Gender is not the only area of underrepresentation that Oxford, like many other universities and institutions, has to grapple with in order to improve our overall diversity. Ethnicity is also a key area for attention and action. At staff level, we are piloting a Black and ethnic minority peer mentoring project to support individual development, and we have begun work on a recruitment initiative to increase the proportion of BME staff in professional and support posts. Overall, more than 20% of our students are from an ethnic minority background, and the proportion of our UK undergraduates from ethnic minorities compares favourably to other selective Russell Group universities. So we are a much more diverse community than you may be encouraged to believe from media stereotypes. But I do not claim that this deals with the challenge of underrepresentation in the context of student ethnicity. We are currently looking very closely at our undergraduate admissions data. In general terms, this indicates that white applicants with similar exam grades tend to fare better than non-white applicants. Why is this? Candidly, we aren't sure. But what we do know is that the more one delves into the detail, the less clear-cut the situation appears. The devil may be in the detail, but the danger is in the generalization. It was Alexandre Dumas who remarked, "All generations are dangerous, even this one." Salutary words. So in some subjects, non-white students do better in terms of the offer of a place than white students. In addition, application rates from different ethnic groups vary widely with subject choice, with those from some underrepresented groups more likely to apply for the most competitive courses. Sometimes the numbers involved are small, so any variation can throw up eye-catching but misleading disparities in success rates. And the picture shifts from year to year. Factors like these make hard and fast conclusions extremely difficult and potentially dangerous. But you know, as well as I do, that Oxford is totally committed to selecting the very best students, regardless of ethnicity or any other factor. It is entirely right that this should be the case, and also entirely necessary for our own future as a world-leading center of academic excellence. That is simply undeliverable unless we are doing everything possible to attract and nurture the most able students and staff. Now, I have deliberately focused in these last few minutes on Oxford student applications, but of course, widening access to Oxford, encouraging and equipping able students to apply in the first place, that is also something to which we devote immense time, effort, and money. I do not propose today to say very much about this, other than to commend the continuing impact of initiatives such as the unique summer schools, which offer promising students from state schools with limited history of successful applications to Oxford, promising those students a real taste of the university. Of the 749 students who participated in Unique in 2012, 491 went on to apply to Oxford, and 197 have been made conditional offers, a success rate of 40%, which is double the success rate of Oxford applicants overall. I also want to focus today on widening access in a broader context, and also very especially in the sense of the third of my themes, digitizing Oxford. I spoke earlier about the challenges of sustained capital investment in our university infrastructure. In the past, infrastructure generally meant physical infrastructure, but that too has changed. In a digital age, our virtual infrastructure is of massive importance and can only become more so. Like any ancient institution, Oxford has been a profoundly print-based culture. Important strands of the long history of the book are woven into the fabric of this university and its spectacular collections. This is a matter of pride, celebration, and most important, of enormous scholarly benefit and advantage. I speak as a scientist, but the thrill of being able to access the first edition of a seminal work or to admire a world-famous manuscript or other priceless artifact in our museums and collections, that is a very special experience indeed. But for all of its antiquity, Oxford is also a place of profound innovation. Indeed, It is Oxford's restless spirit of inquiry and exploration that explains the longevity of the institution and of its preeminence. So the new can hold few fears for us, especially when, as with the digital revolution, it is viewed not as an enemy of what has gone before, but its ally and partner. It is a revolution that affects not just how we record and store what we do, but it is also increasingly central to our core academic life and mission, whether teaching, study, or research. Inevitably, virtual infrastructure has entirely tangible costs, and these too must be funded. So overseeing the university's digital investment has necessarily become a significant feature of how we now approach planning and resource allocation. A new IT committee reports directly to Council, an indication of the priority being accorded to this area, and a recognition of the importance of the digital challenge, especially in an institutional culture as decentralized and varied as ours. We need to find ways of developing our IT provision that are efficient, effective, and coherent while respecting the creative diversity and autonomy of the constituent parts of our institution. It is a familiar challenge for Oxford, and as always, when faced with such challenges, we need to find a way forward that works best for us. That is true for the use of digital technology to ensure that core university operations and services run smoothly and well. But it is also true when we consider how digital technology affects the way that we make our academic riches more widely accessible. It was this that I had in mind a little earlier when I spoke of access in the broader sense. It is a highly topical subject, especially with the intense and some might say at times sometimes feverish attention being devoted in the world of higher education to MOOCs, or massive open online courses. You can get a hint of this intensity from the fact that the New York Times described 2012 as the year of the MOOC, and that acronym has now scaled the august heights of the Oxford English Dictionary, no less. Yet the exact nature of this phenomenon remains somewhat elusive. The term is used to describe anything from pedagogical material made freely available online to fully fledged online courses offering academic credits to registered fee-paying students. So where is Oxford in the great MOOC debate? Well, we are certainly not rushing to judgment, not least because the first and obvious point to make is that, as you would expect of a university whose alumni include the man credited with inventing the World Wide Web, that we have a long and impressive record of sharing widely our rich and diverse academic capital. And let me offer a few examples. Our Department of Continuing Education can trace its history back over 130 years to a movement called Oxford Extension. Today, the department provides more than 800 courses a year, 80 of which are online, offering study across a range of disciplines from archaeology to electrical engineering. Most are short courses of 5 to 10 weeks in duration. Some longer courses result in Oxford qualifications at the undergraduate, advanced diploma and postgraduate levels, while others are designed to help in acquiring and updating skills for professional development. In a less structured way, online users can also access a vast amount of Oxford's scholarly material through a variety of digital platforms. For example, the University iTunes U site, which features more than 4,000 free audio and video podcasts, has seen over 20 million downloads worldwide in the past 5 years. Digitization has also opened up mass public access to our collections and treasures. The Bodleian Libraries, which have been digitizing content for over 20 years, made a high-profile addition to its online collections in April 2013, which was a digital facsimile of its Shakespeare First Folio, a rarity, as the volume has not been rebound or restored since it was first received by the library in 1623. As a department of the university, Oxford University Press has a mission to further the shared objective of excellence in research, scholarship, and education by publishing worldwide. It does so in more than 40 languages and in a variety of formats. Increasingly, these are digital. The number of downloads of online articles from OUP's 300 journals has reached 1 billion. Its online academic products receive tens of millions of hits each year, while Oxford's Scholarly Editions Online, a major digital publishing initiative which was launched a year ago, brings its prestigious range of scholarly editions to audiences through a digital interface, breathing new life into important texts. OUP is currently working with our Education Committee to explore forms of online teaching and assessment, including English as a foreign language. It's a collaboration that is likely to grow. So whatever the future and fate of MOOCs, it is clear that Oxford will continue to have a great deal to offer online audiences of all types. Our challenge is to find the best way to build on it, to link more of it together, and to improve its accessibility, and increasingly, I suspect, to make sure it fits the needs of very different types of users with very different needs and expectations about their engagement with academia. One more thing. It must be true to Oxford, by which I mean we have a highly distinctive and highly regarded teaching method in this university. It's called the tutorial system. And though it has evolved over time to meet the needs of a changing curriculum, its essence, the close, personal, academic supervision of an individual student by a highly qualified academic, that remains unaltered. Now, I'm not a great one for predictions. As Winston Churchill remarked, I always avoid prophesying beforehand because it's much better to prophesy after the event has already taken place. However, I don't think I'm sticking out my neck too far ahead of the great man's cautionary words by saying that I don't see our commitment to personal education changing greatly. Nor do I see us setting up a sort of parallel open university. The current one does an excellent job. So overall, when I look at Digital Oxford in the mirror, I do see a figure starting to take shape. But it is a shape that must and will be recognizably our own. In conclusion, and as I hope I have illustrated, whether we're talking about funding Oxford, diversifying Oxford, or digitizing Oxford, the key lies in being true to the core academic values and standards that we have shaped over this university's long history. To do that, we do need to look into the mirror, as we have been doing a little this afternoon, and to measure what we see calmly and complacently, calmly and without complacency, excuse me, calmly and without complacency against what we expect to see. It isn't a perfect fit. It never will be. But by the very act act of doing it, we can be a little better prepared to face the world and the high expectations it rightly has of us. Thank you.